Good morning. It's Eddie G's Music World for another week of, of music discussion. It is now May 13th, 2019. Sorry for that. I really am. I haven't been feeling great, but the show must go on, and I'm here to have a good time and relate some fascinating information to you. I mean, Saturday I broke a tooth, I think 30%. So I got to go to the dentist tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. It's just not fun getting old, people. For all of you 20-year-olds, 30, 40-year-olds, it's not going to get better. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not on death's door, but I'm certainly down the hall from it. You know what I mean? Okay, I found some interesting information, and I thought that would be a very good idea for a show. Now, Led Zeppelin, as you may or may not know, was basically two session guys, John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page. They were session guys, plus Jimmy Page was in the Yardbirds too. But he was, they called on him when there were sessions to be done. And John Paul Jones too, but I haven't researched him that much. So I don't know to what extent John Paul Jones did sessions, but he did do sessions. And then, of course, they grabbed two guys from the Band of Joy who were pretty talented, the band, and they pretty much, I think, killed that band, at least until 35, 40 years later when they got the two members back, or one member back, sorry, who helped out a bit with a reunion. But I don't know what they've done, between 1967 and 2000 and whatever. I didn't follow Band of Joy. But of course, that was Robert Plant singing and John Bonham drumming in the Band of Joy. So, and trust me, you go on YouTube, Band of Joy music is on there. Robert Plant solo music is on there. And let me tell you, at 17 and 16 and 18, Robert Plant could sing at least as good as he did in Led Zeppelin. His voice carries. He's a blues singer, but rock and roll is heavy on his in his repertoire. So what happened was the two session guys, Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones, heard Band of Joy and freaked out over Robert Plant's singing. And of course, they must have been impressed with John Bonham's drumming. So that's how the band became. And they got their name from Keith Moon saying, it'll sink like a Led Zeppelin. As you know what a Zeppelin is, it's that big blow up plane that's full of air. The Hindenburg was the one that burnt and crashed, but that's an idea. So lead means it's heavy, so it will crash. So obviously he was wrong because they outsold the Who by many millions and became a massive band, like you all know. So here's what I found. What I found would be somewhat interesting. This is a Rolling Stone Top 20 countdown of his best session musicians. Jet Harris. I've looked up all these things. Some of them I looked up at least, not all of them. Now, Jet Harris was not a big act. He might have been in England. I think this is from 1963. So Jimmy Page was pretty young. And he got onto this. This guy was in the Shadows, which was a massive band with Cliff Richard, sorry. And this guy did a solo album, and the way it works is, you work for the record company has a bunch of session guys around, and they call them up. Can be looked up. Jet Harris, you'll probably find it. Unfortunately, the glitches on my show, I can't play music without it sounding like it's from another planet. It's very far. So I'm not going to waste my time playing music on it. You won't be able to hear much. Anyway, this song, Diamonds, came out in 63. It hit #1 in the UK, imagine, within a month. And it was there for 3 weeks. So maybe this is a good song to research. So from there, Page was a guitarist, so he got a lot of accolades for that. Next was, I'm pretty sure, a #1 hit by Shirley Bassey, Goldfinger. There's some great guitar work on that, and it's Jimmy Page again. 1964. Like I said, let me see if there's anything really exciting to say about it. He was on the tour. No, there's someone else is on the tour, not Jimmy Page. You can hear the acoustic part of that song was by Jimmy Page. So we had a big part of a massive hit across North America. This is surprising to me because I used to listen to this song quite a bit when I was young. At number 18, Nashville Teens, Tobacco Road. If any of the older people are out there listening, like Repo Freak, he knows Tobacco Road. It's a classic. Got a lot of airplay when I was a kid. They're British. It sounds like, the name is Nashville. So I'm trying to see if there's anything. This band did backup for Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins in their tours of Europe. And at some point, they must have just needed a guitar session, and Jimmy Page got the call again. Mickey Most, who I just saw being interviewed from 1968, while he was doing a session work for a Jeff Beck album. I didn't know it was Mickey Most. It was really weird. But I know he's one of the most famous 60s producer from England ever. I said, wow, I wonder if that's Mickey Most. And then at the end, I look it up. Beckola was the album. And of course, it was Mickey Most and Most, not Mouse. And you see a very young Ron Wood in that, very young Jeff Beck in that, and a pretty young Rod Stewart in that too. And they're all kind of riffing and singing and playing and talking. So that's a connection. Mickey Most brought in Jimmy Page for this song. Otis Spann, I've heard of him, but I'm not a big. No, I don't have much knowledge about him. Stirs Me Up. I don't really know if I can give you much background on him. Session work. Let's see. He plays harmonica, not guitar on this. The guitar on this album, song, Stirs Me Up by Otis Spann, was taken up by another guy you might have heard of, Eric Clapton. So these guys all knew each other. It's like everybody knew everybody. Okay, I was on the previously. There was a comment about Dave Barry. So this is Dave Barry, The Crying Game. Now, funnily enough, it's the same song that was in the movie. This is the original. And Jimmy Page was on this one too. They called Little Jim Page or Big Jim Sullivan. Dave Barry, I'm trying to remember what he ended up doing in his career. I know the name, but I'm going to have to look it up. Dave Barry. But was there a Dave Barry that did like... there was a Barry that did a version of that song, Louie Louie. That did the original of Louie Louie, but there was a guy named Barry. Now, I don't know if it's the same guy. Rolling Stones, Heart of Stone. This is amazing because you would think with Keith Richards and then Dave Jones in the band, you wouldn't need another guitarist. But Heart of Stone is a great song, and I'm trying to see if there's anything I could explain how Page got in, but he was on lead guitar. Maybe the other guys couldn't make it. I think it might have been a demo. Not the version that made it out as a hit single. This is likely a demo. So he played on it. Maybe they just were hanging out at the time. And he said, well, you might as well play on it. There wasn't a lot of money in playing on a demo. And You're not going to get. It wasn't the one that was released as the single, but it's out there. I think I did try to listen to it, or I will. Them, Baby Please Don't Go. Now I know them as Van Morrison was in them, and they had Gloria was their big song, and a couple more. And I guess they didn't have a reliable guitarist at the time, but Van Morrison plays guitar. But who knows? These things happen. They called up a guy. They needed another guitarist, and there he was, put in for another session. I think I've heard them do "Baby Please Don't Go." It was released in 1964, so this is a couple of years before he joined the Yardbirds, because he wasn't an original Yardbird member. He replaced. I think he was there at the same time as Jeff Beck, but then Jeff Beck left. Pretty sure. So a year here downtown. I was just listening to Peculiar Clark yesterday. She's 85 years old, 86, because they were talking about Mother's Day and famous British mothers on a radio show I was listening to. So downtown is you can't not know it if you're older than 50, because it was played constantly on the radio in the 60s. And it's a very orchestral song. There's not a lot of like loud guitars on it, but somewhere in the middle of the song, there was a bit of guitar played off of his famous Gibson Les Paul custom-made guitar. Wow. Just imagine, at that point, he was playing like, he was probably getting around 50, 60 American dollars for these songs. He was in demand, but he was not a big star. Maybe they gave him $100. He didn't get writing credit. He didn't get production. He didn't get publishing for this stuff. He was just gigging around. The Kinks. Now, this one is another strange one, because I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm sure Ray Davies is a guitarist, and there might be maybe his brother might be another guitarist, but I think he is. Yeah. So you have two guitarist brothers, but for some reason they felt they could, the record company, or probably felt they could have used another guy, and they probably knew who he was. So 12-string guitar part in the middle of the song. So again, look for this. I'm a lover, not a fighter. These are mostly available on YouTube. So here's one I never heard of at all. We're in the top 10 now. Number 9 or number 10, I don't know. Vashti Bunyan. Sounds, some things just stick in your mind. I'm gonna have to look for that one. Written by Keith Richards and Mick Jagger for the duo Dick and Dee Dee in 1964. So it was written for those guys, but somehow it ended up in the repertoire of Vashti Bunyan. Never heard of this guy. But I don't think it was released. It was produced by Andrew Logham and overseen by Page. He was kind of acting like a producer. It didn't do much, but still, it was a session. Maybe it's a good song. Nika, we know her from the Velvet Underground. The Last Mile. We're in the top 12 now. So I'm going to have to look up this song. I know Nico because she was from Germany. She was trying to make it in music. And again, another Rolling Stones connection here. She ran into Brian Jones. Then Andrew Loog Oldham started to deal with her. Short-term contract on one of his labels. Producer. Now you see, Page was becoming the producer for Loog Oldham, who was the Stones producer and manager, I think, back then. And Oldham co-wrote this song as the B-side to The Last Mile. But anyway, I don't think this went anywhere either. The acoustic guitar was on it. I'm going to have to look that one up. Another established band, but in the next song is The Who, Bald Headed Woman. Now, a thing I know from listening to an interview with Townsend, he said basically what he wasn't really able to just control things completely in the early 60s or mid 60s during the Who's career, because the record company had pretty much a decision to make on all action. So they brought him in. It's the B-side to I Can't Explain, their first hit. He was asked why he was doing the session work. He said he didn't know. He said, I was playing the riff in the background behind Pete Townsend. I didn't need to be there, he said. You could barely hear me, but it was magical to be in the control room. Page's contributions are much prevalent on Bald Headed Woman. Gotta listen to that. The Manish Boys, I Pity the Fool. Must be number 12. No, number 13. 1965. Wow. Did a lot of work. Now, okay, this is the one I remember. Yes, I actually heard this. This is a young David Bowie on the lead vocals, the Manish Boys, 1965. David Bowie took him a 5-6 year to make any kind of hits at all. And he might have had some success in England, but he was not known at all in the U.S. at this point. He went by Davy Jones, but then the Monkees kind of got hot. So Davy Jones, he had to change his name, David Bowie, because Davy Jones was a big deal by the mid-60s. Let's see. Bobby Bland wrote it, who I've heard of. Didn't make it again, and not a big song. But there was a solo in the middle of the song by Jimmy Page. So there he is again. Let's see. The effort wasn't all for naught, however. According to Bowie, it was during this session that Page gifted him with the riff that he would use for his song The Supermen off his 1970 album, The Man Who Sold the World. So he used the riff. I don't know if he paid him for it, but maybe they're buddies and they didn't do that. Marianne Faithfull, another Stones connection, one of Mick's ex-girlfriend. In My Time of Sorrow, 1965. Marianne had a sweet voice back then. She was kind of morphed into this rough-voiced singer in the mid-'80s, and she had broken English, an amazing song. But she, at the early days, she kind of had a decent voice, like a quieter voice. And Page co-wrote that song, In My Time of Sorrow. Maybe this was, okay, no, it wasn't. She wasn't his girlfriend. Okay. It was co-written by Jackie DeShannon, who also did What the World Needs Now Is Love, Sweet Love, and co-wrote Betty Davis' Eyes, which was massive. And this is written for Faithful for that album, but Page would they did a tour, Marianne Faithfull, and Page backed her on that tour. Now this one I knew about many years ago, because sometimes people talk about things like famous session work by famous people on hit records. This was a massive song in 1966 by Donovan, Sunshine Superman. And I thought Hurdy-Gurdy Man he did too. I think that was the one I heard about. But for him to have done Sunshine Superman, you can kind of make out that guitar. That was a really big part of the song. Donovan played guitar too, so there we go. We're back to the same thing. But there it says, reading up on its song, that he's also worked with him on Hurdy-Gurdy Man, Teen Angel, and The Trip. So Sunshine Superman was inspired by the Superman comics. I remember that being a really big song. He would reunite with Donman later on to do Mellow Yellow again in 2011. But, this is a big song, and you can hear his style on Hurdy-Gurdy Man and Sunshine Superman. It's very clear. The Fleur de Lis, Circles, 1966. Again, connected to the Rolling Stones, because Andrew Loog Oldham had a record label, Immediate Records signings, and he was definitely in a partnership with Page for a lot of stuff. Wow, Pete Townsend wrote this. Let's see if he wrote this one. Who track? Really confusing. Some kind of legal dispute made it not come out for a while, but the Fleur de Lis did this song, and I don't think there's a lot to say about this band because I really don't know much about it. But he's on it. Go look it up. The Fleur de Lis, Circles. It's very confusing information about how it happened and who wrote what, but it doesn't matter. Now, this was I listened to yesterday because I caught the studio session of Jeff Beck with Rod Stewart and Ron Wood. And Beck's song, Beck's Bolero, Jeff Beck jumped in on that one. That was a big FM song, at least. This is after he left the Yardbirds in 1966. And he obviously knew Page from the Yardbird days. I think this was after he left the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. They were both out of the Yardbirds. They had both been in, they had both left. So then knew each other because they played together, and sometimes that one played when the other one wasn't there. And so he called them up and said, well, I could use another guitar part. And this is from the orchestral part of Maurice Ravel's orchestral piece, Bolero. This is in May 1966. It was the B-side to a song called Hi Ho Silver Lining. And I think Moon was on this. Yeah. He heard about the Led Zeppelin formation discussion. And of course, lead balloon. Oh, he didn't say Led Zeppelin. He said it would go over like a lead balloon, which they obviously changed to Zeppelin. I thought he said Led Zeppelin, but it kind of inspired him to pick the name Led Zeppelin because he said lead balloon. He must have been kind of, oh, I see. He got John Paul Jones to play bass. Who's Keith Moon played drums on this session. So he obviously knew Jones, and they must have been talking about the band that they were working on, that they were looking to form a band. And of course, they were two parts short. But it was at this point that they were digging around for another couple of members. They needed a singer, they needed a drummer. And then all reports state that they walked into a club and heard Band of Joy and heard Robert sing, and they were blown away. And they, of course, I think Robert Plant made a good move, and he went to form Led Zeppelin, and he bought him as well. And here's a guy, I mean, I like this guy's voice. People say, like I saw in YouTube comments, why is he singing this Hey Joe? Like I was watching him sing Hey Joe in French. Why is he singing it in French? Or he shouldn't sing it in French. And I answered I commented on the YouTube. I said, music is music. It doesn't bother me that the guys changed the lyrics to French. He's not erasing all the other 20 versions of Hey Joe. He's not stopping you from listening to Hey Joe by Hendrix, by The Leaves, by Alvin Lee, by there were so many of them. I just listened for an hour to all kinds of versions of Hey Joe. So here's Johnny Hallyday again. And another tidbit about Johnny Hallyday. Not only was he massive in France and Quebec, I'm pretty sure that the guitarist and keyboardist from Foreigner for a time was in Johnny Halliday's band, Mick Jones. I have a feeling. Johnny Hallyday died about 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, his album was Tout Cassé. That means to break everything. Called the French Elvis by that time. I mean, okay. He was huge. And again, this is probably when the Zeppelin is just about to gel. And we're dealing with, I'm trying to see, I don't really know any of the songs off this. Like, I don't know the song at Tout Cassé, but it's worth a listen. For you that are American, if you listen, you won't know Johnny Hallyday very much. I barely have heard his music myself. Okay, so we're dealing with the next song. I never knew that he played on this song. With a little help by my friends. Wow, Joe Cocker. Just before Led Zeppelin started, he got in the studio to help out Joe Cocker with this solo debut solo album. You can hear that guitar very, very clear on that song. I mean, I never knew. I mean, I've heard that song 10,000 times by Joe Cocker. I saw him sing it live, but not with Page, of course. But imagine he just laid down that brilliant opening guitar lick. That's the difference between great musicians and just people playing musicians. If I were to guess, I would say, not sure, that the basics of the song were kind of laid out to him. And nobody said, play guitar like this, Jimmy. He just said, okay, turn on the equipment. And he just laid it the fuck down. Because he knows what he's doing. 1968, he'd already been around for 5 years playing sessions. So you have to be impressed by that guitar lick in that song. His signature. This is a number 1 for Jimmy Page. Maybe in England, I don't know about US, but it was for sure in England number 1. PJ Proby. Excuse me again. I had 102.7 fever on the weekend, so I'm a little bit out of it. But PJ Proby, Jim's Blues. PJ Proby was a guy I've heard of. Or was it a girl? This is just before Led Zeppelin formed. But what? Let me see if there's anything much I can remember or learn about her. Oh, PJ Proby, it's a hymn. They had worked together on Proby's top 10 hit "Hold Me." I didn't know that. This session work was kind of like a purview to the Zeppelin music because he was doing a very similar guitar, and why it's talking about Plant. Wow, he was on this too. Okay, so this was a transitional time. So that was his final session of a note, and then we all know what happened. 200 and something million albums later, they managed to pull off in 12 years 200 million probably records, maybe more. But this concludes the moment. And I'm really glad I made the effort to put out a show. There were feelers put out in a big way to get guests, but there's a guy who I won't say his name. He seemed tempted, but he backed away. Uh, I won't tell you his name because I don't want to. I doubt if he'll ever hear this because he didn't seem too interested in doing the show. He says, "Email me and I'll let you know." Uh, his mother was on one of his most famous sitcoms of the 1970s. But he himself, he's an entertainer, uh, and I said it would be nice to talk to him on the air and talk about what he's doing in music and show business, and not so much music, but entertaining. What is his experiences? And I had a few questions ready to go, but people see that you're not reaching thousands of people, so they think, well, for the fun of it, I'm not interested. If I can't further my career in a good way, like by getting 500 more people to come to my shows, then I'm not going to do Eddie G's show because it's nothing against me. They don't know who I am. But I'm going to toss things out there once in a while. There were a few very, very obscure music acts that I tried the last week. Music acts that are not selling out clubs even. So it's not like I'm not going after Neil Diamond and Jimmy Page and Roger Waters. I'm going after people that have had success that maybe want to discuss it. But maybe they go and they watch my videos and they see my Twitter and they think maybe this guy's a little crazy, so they don't want to do it. Anyway, I'll still do the show as long as I can. Eddie G's Music World, thank you. It's been fun. I'm done for today, and we will see you next time. Take care.